Welcome, everybody. Coming to today's meeting. I'm really excited because we've been eagerly anticipating the input from the ad hoc committee. And so that's pretty much the main thing we're going to do today. And then the last item is when I'll share with you something that the board has asked us to consider next. So let's see, Andrew, could you go ahead and...
Yes, I'm sharing the screen. Let me just resize it a little bit. Okay. Do you want the agenda up or do you just want to go straight into the document?
I'd like you to take roll first, please.
Okay. Second.
Andrew and I are kind of sort of tweaking things a little bit, so I'll be downstairs now instead of being upstairs doing the slideshow thingy. And Andrew will be handling the text. So usually he's made the PowerPoint for the meeting. So we'll just give him a second so he can get the roll call list.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to do a roll call for all task force members. Is Jan Coppinger here? I believe she's in the Zoom room. Yeah, I am seeing her.
Mm-hmm. She just unmuted, but I don't hear her.
Yes, I think I can hear you now, Jan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jan is here. Okay, Will Weiss.
Present.
It's Robert Geary.
Present.
Okay, Nara Del Baca.
Present.
Okay, Jennifer Smith.
Here.
All right. And Rebecca Harper, who I do not believe is going to be able to attend today.
I believe she's not coming today.
Okay. And do we have a representative from the fire districts?
Yeah, Chief Cepeda's here.
Right.
Did we only have 7? I thought we had 8.
We do have 8. Let's see. Who am I missing here?
Me, Catherine Vanderwall.
Oh, I'm sorry, Catherine Vanderwall. All right, Catherine. Is Catherine present? I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That would make sense.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Maria, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Good, thank you. So next item is consideration of minutes for the December 12th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to go over those? If not, I'll give you a minute to scan them. Did anyone from the task force have any questions, concerns about the minutes? We'll open that first and then we'll open it up to public in a second. Thank you. It gets high in here.
Yeah.
But it's too loud.
I'll leave the other door.
Okay, that's good.
Block out some of the sound.
Okay, if there are no questions from the task force,
I'll move to accept and file.
well, let me see if there's any comments from the public. Looking for raised hands if you have a question or comment about the minutes from the December 12th meeting. Couple seconds. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Move to accept and file minutes from the December 12th meeting.
Second.
Online, if you're going to second something, could you tell me your name just so I make sure we get it in the minutes?
It's Nara.
Awesome. Thank you, Nara. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. If there's anyone against online, either say aye or put your thumb down picture thingy. Nope. Okay, those pass. The next, we're going to go into presentation of recommendations on the ag exempt and temporary ag structures. for cannabis activities by the ad hoc committee. So our ad hoc committee consisted of Jennifer Smith, Paul Blues on behalf of the fire chiefs, and Rebecca Harper for the ag. Since Rebecca's not here, everybody still got the comments color coded, so we are aware of the comments from Lake County Farm Bureau. Jennifer, would you like to lead this discussion, or should we just go point by point?
Why don't we go point by point and then I
Okay.
can interject.
Okie dokie. First, I wanted to thank the ad hoc committee. You had a job to do, like right as holidays hit, and then, the holiday sicknesses hit and the weather hit. So thank you very much for persevering and getting us something that we can consider today. Okay, so let's go to the first one, ag exempt buildings. And I am going off the list. Yes, exactly what Andrew has up there. Thank you. This is the report from the ad hoc committee. So one of the reasons, let's just refresh on the purpose for what we're doing here. As Andrew has right up there on the screen, the farmers need to begin planning for their next season as soon as possible. And that is why the board asked the task force to make their considerations and recommendations on this ordinance, so we can get it through the next step, which is the Ag Advisory Committee, then the Planning Commission, and then to the board. So we've still got a ways to go, since hearings at the Planning Commission and the board will be noticed public hearings. That sort of spreads out the time a little bit. But the goal is to get this in place as soon as possible. Section number 1, ag exempt structures. The action that was taken by the task force before, that there's going to be no change to the definition of ag exempt structures, including no electrical. However, actually, that's not entirely true. We do have electrical that is allowed on ag exempt structures, but they have to get the electrical permits. And then cannabis operators would now be allowed to utilize these ag exempt structures with maintaining the same definition and criteria for them. We have a yellow. Okay, so Farm Bureau says with the understanding that processing shall not occur in these buildings as it's not a permitted use. So I think that that's pretty much understood by all parties.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ag exempt structure is used mainly for storage of farming implements and supplies, but it's not a place of employment or work.
And I believe that if we just referenced the ag exempt building code in this, that way, should there be changes, whatever applies to one applies to the other.
I agree. Yeah, it's best to keep the criteria in one location,
Yeah.
so that it doesn't become overly complex. Section, okay, so our next item on the agenda is actually taking action on this. So right now, we're just going to go through for informational purposes only and get public input, and then we're going to go on to the other item and just do a quick rerun of these items, so that we're not doing both items at one time. Because Catherine's doing the minutes, and I don't want to stress her out. No, not you. Catherine
You seem
Schieffer.
stressed out.
Right, one of our planning staff.
some good minutes.
Yeah, one of our planning staff has been doing a great job in getting these minutes to us, so I'm gonna try to make it as easy for her as possible. Second category, agricultural hoops for cultivation only. Willie, did you want to speak to the fire chief's comments on this section?
Yeah, Paul had done a little bit of a map for everybody to kind of look at, but it's, right now, cannabis there's the map, and he had allowed the reduction to a max of 3 foot separation. But then, that means if egress has to equate to a 4290 compliant road for means of ingress and egress. And that has to be maintained at all time with no obstruction. So if they have wheelbarrows or other things, tractors or other implements in those are going to have to be widened to accommodate the stuff that's going to provide a partial obstruction. So he reduced that down quite a bit, down to 3 foot allowability, to give them a little bit more space to add on more.
Great, thank you. There was also some clarification in the beginning, just regarding what can be, like the definition of the ag exempt structure. So I don't think we have any discussion about that first part. And then we get into the next part. What Willie is pointing out right now is actually a little bit later on down this section. So before we get to that one, let's also just talk about the materials that would be allowed. The fire guys are fine with the Santa Cruz County language for hoop houses, which I think LCCA introduced that. Is that correct?
Correct.
That definition? Okay. And so that definition is the one that's in italics, right?
Correct.
That shade structures less than 12 feet in height are constructed of light frame materials and covered with shade cloth or clear flexible plastic with no significant associated electrical, plumbing, or mechanical equipment other than irrigation equipment. Okay.
Really, the capture the rest of part A, is that, that is should not be a place for human habitation or a place of employment. So we just want to make sure that we are sticking to that top section in red as we, before we move on to that second section. That
So
part right there.
Right, okay, so we're clear that this is still limited to cultivation only. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
All right.
And so the difference though is that this is an ag exempt hoop house. And so we have not dealt with ag exempt hoop houses yet, right? Just ag exempt structures.
Right.
So this is a different type of structure. Okay.
Right now, we're just talking about cultivation.
Correct, yeah, not the processing or anything else like that, just the cultivation.
Right.
And so Farm Bureau said that hoop buildings being used for cultivation would require the appropriate permitting, either a minor or major, and any structure where cultivation or processing occurs could not be included in this. So I just wanted to point out from the Farm Bureau's input that the minor or major are actually the use permits, in which case we would just include the hoop buildings as part of the project description in that use permit.
Okay.
Then green, LCCA, right. So clarifying this is only for cultivation hoops only. Good. Are there any questions on that one from the task force?
So for the name of that, for that subsection A, is that gonna stay as ag exempt hoops for cultivation? Because it seems to be, a misleading name. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't qualify for ag exempt.
If anything, it should just be,
Well, this would, what I understand, and feel free to correct me, is that ag exempt would mean that it would not require a building permit.
Correct. And we already have hoop houses in use and approved through that ag exempt hoop house.
Oh, we
You have
do?
people working under them? Because people are in there maintaining the plants and lighting and,
There's no lighting.
or, you're doing your pest treatments and. But I think that's the biggest stickler, is like you're not, for ag exempt, it's like, I don't have a problem saying like, if it wants to be reworded another way,
Mm-hmm.
but ag exempt is like, you read the definition of it, it's not a place of employment, people can't be working under there.
That's the difference, yeah, that's what I was,
So like an ag exempt building, you park your equipment, whatever, it's like, you're in and out, you're not necessarily in there working,
so,
tending to the plants.
This is
Instead of-
also 6 millimeter plastic. It's not like it's a structure that's gonna fall down and hurt
Yeah.
anybody.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we should entertain a different word than ag exempt, maybe building permit exempt.
Yeah, not
That's what I'm-
unpermitted.
So that we would minimize confusion.
that's probably a good idea.
Okay, so I'm gonna write that down and we can take action if that's gonna be a recommendation later. So let me just,
And we could also look at how Santa Cruz, since the fire department is comfortable with that definition. I had it pulled up here.
Maybe it could say like exempt agricultural shade structures, or, I don't know, never mind, I'm confusing things. But I just think like changing the verbiage of that so that it doesn't like muddy the waters.
Yeah, and we want to make, probably using the word unpermitted is not great because we don't want to,
no, you're right, yeah.
conflate, unlicensed.
That's a whole different level of confusion.
So
Yeah, don't want to-
Yeah.
Limit exempt or building.
Right,
So
or we
in
could-
Santa Cruz, which the fire chief was fine with this, according to the statements, their exemption from requirement for a building permit.
Which I'm thinking maybe we'll just call it hoops for cultivation and then add a line that says it's exempt from a building permit if it fits this criteria.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
There you go.
Pretty exempt hoops for cultivation.
And then I just wanted to also flag that, are we going to have a definition section in this? Because I think that the definition, what folks are talking about with processing here is different than the state license for processing for cannabis. And we may need to highlight that or,
Agreed, a lot of that does need to go back to the definitions,
Yeah.
okay.
Well,
All right.
ideally.
which are
our
referencing the
definitions
state,
mirror the
hopefully,
state,
right?
though. Yeah,
Right.
I know that the board was open to that. They didn't want to create their own glossary.
Cool.
Okay. Okay, so I just made a note on that one. Exempt only. So now we get to the modified spacing that Paul's diagram showed us.
Right.
Did we have any questions on that for Willie?
This is,
Paul's on board now, so Paul.
Okay.
This map.
Maria, sorry, Maria,
Oh.
we have Robert Geary's hands raised.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, and just not, it's like sometimes with the two different types of structures and the types of structures, we're talking about ag structures. So as far as for the hoop housing, there's no footings, there's no anything that of that nature that's happening when these are being put up, right? Because we're talking about
Your
that-
question, so if I understand your question, Robert, you're confirming that there aren't any sort of ground disturbances to anchor that down? Well, we
Right.
have to anchor it somehow, right? I don't,
rebar with up to 18 inches in the ground is what
okay,
stated.
okay, so did you hear that, Robert?
Yeah,
Yeah, but my understanding there's a variety of methods that cultivators are interested in,
right.
which is why the language was kind of relaxed a little bit to allow for more variability with building materials. I just want to bring up that point.
No, and I thank you, Andrew, because that's one of the questions, well, one of the reasons why I asked the question, because there are the different types of methods. And some of these areas, I think where the cultivation is happening, depending on whether an ARC study or anything else has been done, some of it is definitely sensitive area. So if we're talking about, whether we're putting footings or something into the ground 18 inches, what does that entail?
Right.
On what method? So I'm not sure if we want to detail it or direct it right down to a specific, if there's certain requirements depending on the type of ground disturbance that happens for whatever method that you're using for the hoop houses. I think that's one of the things that we have to take into consideration.
I think one of the things that I feel needs to be recognized is we're not trying to circumvent any of the approval process. This is just the pathway to do things. And if something comes up in ARC review or CEQA review that needs to be addressed with a particular project or style of hoops, then it gets addressed.
Mhm.
This is just the pathway to do that. So if it's going to be, a lot of ground disturbance to put these in, that's when the other agencies come into play.
Right. Also, there is a section in this ordinance that has questions to be answered in applications. Let's make sure we just add the proposed anchoring of the hoop houses into that. And that way, when the tribes get the notifications for review, you'll have that information up front.
Right. And I think one of the reasons why I asked this too is because sometimes when we're at consultation and we're trying to explain sometimes the sensitivity of a certain area, we're looking at really the archaeological study that will have one area, say on the north end, one area that's on the south end, and say these houses are in the middle, and they're saying, oh, there's really nothing to be worried about. And what we've always brought to the table, what we always try to bring to the table is making sure that everyone understands that just because things were found in those archaeological areas where they were at, and you got an ARC site that's on both sides, it doesn't take out the fact that there's nothing that's in the middle. It just hasn't been found yet. And so I think it's making sure that there's something set into place that is definitely something to be considered about.
Good. Okay, making note. Okay, next section, access to water. Paul, would you like to speak to the fire comments on E?
I think we need to go back to fire safety code to roads.
Oh, sure, thank you.
So,
That's in the second section, right? Okay, all egress corridors must end in a 4290 approved road.
yeah. These are plastic hoops. That you will see in any other ag community, you'll see acres and acres of these without 4290 roads going through every 200 feet. It really makes the project cost prohibitive. We don't see that kind of request in any other form of agriculture to have a 4290 road every 200 feet. These are temporary in nature. I'm not going to speak to how you fight a fire, but I doubt they're going to drive into the fire. So I think we're just concerned that this seems, how do I say it nicely, overreach?
I thought that the county had passed an ordinance or adopted an ordinance that exempted cultivation from 4290. Am I missing something?
There is for outdoor cultivation. I can bring that up if you give me 1 second.
So
And this
the
is still
thing
an
about
outdoor
this,
license.
it's now going to be considered outdoor, right? So I would think that they would fall under that same 4290 exemption.
But the thing is, it doesn't change our ability to get into and fight a fire, and we do respond to right into the fire, whether it's direct or indirect attack on that fire. Is our ability to get into and out of is critical. And through my career in the Morgan Valley Noble Ranch Road has been a challenge in these areas.
What we're trying to accomplish with that spacing is something that works for everybody. It gives them reduced spacing for the hoop houses. And the layout doesn't even necessarily have to be how I did it in that picture. It's just merely to show that you treat that whole cultivation area like it's a Safeway. As long as you've got an egress standard, that 3 foot is a minimum aisle width in between aisles, right? So it's the same thing. It's free, clear, unobstructed, minimum 3 feet in between. And as long as you meet evacuation distances, like it was a whole enclosed building to where we know that people that are there can get somewhere to safety that's away from all of those structures. We don't want to say, hey, they can be a foot apart and you can't get through them and there's wheelbarrows or whatever in the way and you've got to go 600 feet before you get anywhere away from these structures. It's all just a matter of egress to try and make sure that they can get to a safe spot in the event that there is an emergency or a fire. And it's still wide enough that no matter where anything is, we can fit a gurney through there, we can fit personnel through there, we can stretch hose lines through there, all of that kind of stuff. We may not be able to fit a rig or a piece of equipment, but we can work.
What about, can you put the picture up, Andrew?
Hey, Andrew, can you go back to the, there you go, hoop house layout. Yep, thanks.
This is not even an acre of canopy. So you're gonna ask for 3 4290 roads within an acre.
Just for, can you tell me what the 4290 road is briefly, so I can kind of visualize it? Paul, when you were making that diagram and coloring in the 4290 compliant road, about what's the approximate width of those?
I'm going to check that again real quick because I don't want to quote wrong numbers. So give me just a minute.
Okay. Jennifer, from your background, what size does that look like? Because I didn't do all the area calculations.
It's, I'd have to go back and look at it to their 20 by 100s.
That's what.
When I did the math out the other day on this actually, to try to see what the length of like a 1 acre grow would be. It looks like if it's a perfect square, 1 acre, it's 159 and a half feet. So 160 feet by 160. Does that sound about right? That'd be about an acre.
grabbing our calculators.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. It's
Hello?
about 22,000 feet, 22, 20. And so somewhere around there. I think I did it for 25,000.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
I can hear somebody.
Hi, this is Trey. I was just want to interject that
Hey.
for a road to be 4290 compliant, it doesn't necessarily have to be 20 feet wide. That's when there's two directions of travel. Actually, I think a 12-foot wide road would be sufficient in this case in the drawing where you have circulation. So it'd be one direction of travel down between the greenhouses and then another direction of travel the other way.
Thanks, Trey. We're gonna call on task force members right now. That was helpful, but we're gonna wait until Paul gets back to us regarding that width of road. I think he's still checking on that.
And an acre is 208 feet by 208 feet.
Okay.
Thank you. This is why I was not a math major.
Me neither, I understand.
Okay, but then we are dealing with multiple acres all clustered together, which would be an awful lot of 4290 roads.
Most other municipalities allow you to have, so long as you have a 4290 compliant road around the site itself.
Right, which is actually kind of what this says. It just says, and a 4290 compliant road around each cultivation area. But it's the egress corridors. Well, the egress corridors it says the egress corridors must end in a 4290 approved road for access and evacuation. But the picture shows it going through, the picture shows the 4290 road as the egress corridor, doesn't it? Not ending in. So it would be my understanding the way
I think a key factor in this conversation is that there's different 4290 standards for different uses, whereas this resolution says from the Board of Supervisors in 2019, it is the recommendation of this board of this board to the county fire official and to all fire protection districts in Lake County that outdoor cannabis cultivation be recognized as an agricultural activity in the application of Public Resource Code section 4290 and 4291. So with that in mind, there's different commercial standards and there's different residential standards. So like a house out in a rural area wouldn't necessarily need the same commercial 4290 standards as a commercial operation. I think here we need to kind of dive into what the agricultural standards are for 4290 compliance.
Willie,
I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. That was very helpful. Willie, if Willie's still on, are you familiar with what agricultural 4290 standards are?
That's what I'm looking up now. I know that we have definitions between driveways and roads, and the 10-foot he was talking about is referred to as a driveway where there's no more than one structure, and then it's 75,000 pound compaction all season surface. I'm just trying to find the ag portion of the 4290.
I'm pretty sure for a single lane driveway, it's 12 feet. I'm pretty sure, but I'm having trouble finding that exact number right now. It's 20 feet if it's a 2-lane road, but for a single lane driveway, it's 12 feet.
It is 12 foot and 75,000 pound all season compaction with a turnout every 400 foot for fire equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to find the differentiation between, the residential versus the ag.
Okay, let's give you guys a minute for that because Jan's had her hand up for a while. Nara, we'll go right back to you in a second. Jan?
Hello?
Hey, Jan.
Hi. So I was just thinking, looking at that map, that to have the 4290 in the interior is overkill. I was thinking just around the perimeter would be important, but I really think to have that inside, if you have 1 acre and that much, it's got to be taken up with roads. I think that's way overkill. Just my opinion.
All right, we're still giving the fire reps a minute to sort of settle on a width.
Myra, we can, if the group wants to move on, and then we'll capture this at the end half.
Sounds good. Okay.
Just before we move on, can I ask on this image here, this is a hoop house, Jennifer? This, what we're seeing here would be vertical hoop house, vertical hoop house, vertical hoop, is that
Correct,
right?
yeah.
So the blue markings are actually inside the interior of the hoop house structure, whereas the pink would be the exteriors?
No, I think they mean the blue to be between hoop houses.
Oh, really?
So
So that's the
green
blue
is,
part, right?
yeah.
So we're looking at like a couple dozen hoop houses, not 3 hoop houses. I mean, I'm just trying to get the scope of this correct.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, and there is a key at the bottom if anybody wants to scroll down. But, so it's a 20 by 98 hoop.
Right.
Or by 90, 20 by 90.
And 290s would make 183 plus,
Yeah.
plus an egress point in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, I have a 2-acre canopy farm, but it takes up close to 5 acres of space. So I did the measurements on my mapping today. I'd have to have 4 of these roads inside of my canopy.
Yeah, and that's a lot of extra work for state, sorry.
And it's also like just more ground disturbance if I want to switch the
Exactly.
routes. Like now I'm going to have to, gravel and compact and.
Well, I mean, if, I'm not an expert on any of this, but the description we just heard of a 4290 compliant road, it's like, it's quite a road. It's like, fire truck passable road. And so, yeah.
Okay. Let's go on. I don't know that we're going to get that settled right now, so we're going to come back to that one.
Okay.
Let's go on to access to water. Regarding the compliance with NFPA flow rate standards, we had one comment submitted here from our fire reps. Paul, did you want to speak to this one?
Which one are you going down to right now? Sorry, I was looking on the
Well, actually, it's a pretty easy one. It's just you were agreeing with the fire safety standards. So, and just giving an explanation of it. But you did go on to talk about that there might be more than one hydrant needed, and also the installation of knock boxes, which isn't really our access to water. I thought that was overall emergency access, but I think that I'm under the impression that knock boxes are standard in our conditions of approval already.
Knock boxes are standard in the conditions of approval. I just wanted to kind of highlight that just to have it out there so that it was in there. And as far as the fire hydrants, I mean, for a 1-acre property, you could probably get away with one. But if you start talking about somebody that has 100 acres, it might be more prudent to have more of them. So it goes back to one of those. I didn't want to just say, one's sufficient or 10's sufficient, because it just depends on the scope of what's going on. If it's just a cultivation area, it's completely different than if it's a cultivation area with buildings on site to process and this and that. Whatever the plans may be. So it's just easier to not say that only one is required and just throw the additional may be required based off of what's going on. And I know that's kind of getting out of the temporary hoop house area, but just better to kind of state that.
It's not bad to point it out. That's pretty standard in when we have like a large subdivision, or a large housing development. It kind of depends on what comes in front of you. So, that makes sense. Jan, is your hand still up, or did you put it up again?
Sorry, I forgot to take it down.
Okay, all right. So then we'll move on. Is there any further discussion with the task force on that one? Pretty much fire agreeing with the standard. Okay, so let's go down to temporary hoops with pathway to permanent and seasonally recurring ag structures. So my understanding is temporary hoops getting transitioned over to permanent structures. Are they still hoops? I wasn't.
I mean, okay, hang on. Where did we go? What page?
We are
On page 3, on section B, allow temporary hoops with pathway for.
Got it, sorry.
seasonally occurring.
Yeah.
Hoops are pretty much always going to be temporary.
Okay,
And then,
so the permanent permitted structure is a greenhouse?
correct.
Okay. And is that like a thing? There's a drive, there's a strong impetus to transition from hoops to greenhouses?
Some people may want to.
Okay.
It would change all of their licensing
Real
to go to a
quick,
mixed site licensing.
It
Yeah,
would be mixed light.
Yeah.
that would be a significant
Correct.
modification to the use permit. Okay,
for 4290, section 1273.08 is one-way roads and it's 10 feet. And that's also the same for private driveways, 10 feet.
But then do we go back to the question of, is ag exempt from 4290 for the county?
right,
Well, it says in the resolution that the board did.
Yes.
That it's to be treated as the same ag standards.
right.
So,
And it is, what Paul just told us, the 10-foot, is that ag standards?
is the 10-foot ag standards, Paul?
I am not sure about that at all for ag
okay.
standards.
That's it, okay. Just want to make sure I didn't miss something.
Yeah, okay. All checking. Okay.
I think they're still, checking on that.
Okey doke. So we're going back to what we were just talking about then, the transition from hoop houses to greenhouses.
Correct.
I don't think Paul can speak to this one right now because he's still looking up the 4290.
I would make a comment on this in terms of hoop houses for cultivation on outdoor operations. From a land use planning point of view, I do not necessarily have any issues with putting up hoop houses out there temporarily and then, especially taking down the plastic sheeting when the season's over, mainly because Lake County receives the majority of its precipitation through the winter months when people are not cultivating outdoors. You leave those structures up there, that's going to add a lot of impervious surface and require a lot of drainage measures to accommodate for that. However, if you kept them and treated them as temporary structures, you could take down that surface. You could even leave up some of the framing. There wouldn't necessarily be a major impact. So that was one approach to it. So it wouldn't necessarily trigger a reevaluation of the initial study and environmental review. Converting outdoor to greenhouses, though, on the other hand, would most likely require a new study and a new circulation of those impacts.
Right, but also we aren't talking about temporary hoop houses until later, right? These are not temporary, are they?
For cultivation?
Right.
Yes, because they should come down seasonally so that we don't create any impervious surfaces during winter.
Well, I think it's great. I just don't see any place where it says that they're taken down. There isn't anything in the.
I believe further up when they were referring to the ag exempt structures, ag exempt hoop houses for cultivation.
Hoops for cultivation.
For the temporary structures also, I would like to highlight that it was kind of on behalf of the Lake County Fire Chiefs that they would like to see the whole structure completely removed. It wouldn't just be removal of the plastic. It would be removal of the structure and everything as a whole down to the ground.
Look at the end of the graph.
And this is still just ag exempt, right? Down to the ground removal.
I think we should refrain from the ag exempt term for cultivating hoop houses.
For the
You could call them temporary
permit
hoop houses.
for the temporary hoop houses that will not require a permit. Those are the ones we're talking about taking the framing down on.
Hence the temporary, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Sonoma County has a pretty good approach to it, actually.
All right, sorry, that confusion I think was in my own mind. So now we can get back to what we were talking about. The conversion from temporary to permanent. The part that I actually found interesting or that jumped out at me was the use of temporary generators. only because that would affect the different part of our code where generators are not allowed unless it's an emergency. So this is this is a change. But if I understand correctly, what's coming, or the information that's coming anecdotally from the cannabis industry, is that PG&E is so far behind, you can't get permitted power quickly. Is that correct?
I meant 3 years.
Yeah,
Holy moly.
I can attest to that as a non-cannabis operator as well, yeah.
All right.
And you can
Yeah,
see
and-
down there when we start talking about generators too, that the 2022 California Fire Code that just went into effect actually has a section in it now for portable generators and how to regulate them in their use.
Okay.
Where before it wasn't mentioned at all.
When we're talking about these generators, our concern is that of hazmat. So that's kind of why I was hoping environmental health would be involved, because when we're talking about multiple generators and fuel and oil being used for filling, refueling, there's a probability of a spill, and they should be required to the 6.95 health and safety standards for either a hazmat business plan, or if their greater storage of 1,320 gallons, you're required to have a spill prevention countermeasure control plan.
Okay.
So yeah, I have spoken with members from the DCC as well as our air quality control management district. And I guess the key factor for both these state regulations as well as our local air quality regulations is to make sure that we have those generators, for one, registered, and two, I think optimally they would be modern generators. I think where air quality has some concerns are just mainly with the older generators. And another caveat there is that if you look closely at our ordinance where it says backup use is for indoor and mixed light cultivation. So it's a little tricky. There are the environmental health concerns with the hazardous materials. Ideally, I believe in this document, I read that small scale solar could be an option. The fire risk is much lower. The pollution, I would almost want to say, just to make things easier, go with temporary small scale solar to help bridge that transition until PG&E can get somewhere. So, or if you are going to be using generators, just make sure you follow the new guidelines, as I believe Paul had mentioned, or maybe it was Willie, and make sure that it's, you're registering your generator with air quality. Just some thoughts on that.
Air quality will usually include those in their comments. So those would just go into the conditions of approval regarding the level, like the age and the type of generator that would be allowed.
True, but think about this for approved projects that are in this transition.
Well, that's another interesting point. Is it only then to be allowed for those that are transitioning into greenhouses? Because
not necessarily transitioning, it's accommodating to the new allowable uses that the state are allowing for outdoor licenses and outdoor cultivation.
Well, exactly.
So they can keep their outdoor license and their outdoor permit, but they're allowed to use more items such as these temporary hoop houses and a certain level of electrical application for ventilation, which is where the state is going with this.
Which is great. It's just the criteria or the regulations for generators should not then be alone housed in the allow temporary hoops with a pathway to permanent structures. It sounds like it transcends that. So that's my only point, is if we're going to make recommendations for allowance of temporary hoop houses, we need to get it out of this section and put it into a more of a general section.
Sorry, could I just jump in? This is Sarah, and I wrote the first draft of this document. I'm the policy director for LCCA, and we actually wrote those same recommendations in there twice in two different places for that reason explicitly, that we just wanted to have consistent generator regulations that followed best practices. So we also brought it up anywhere else they're used. So I do agree it should be uncoupled there. We were just trying to respond as they had originally been drafted.
Right, okay.
And totally agree with you that they just need to be global generator rules that make sense for public safety.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just making a note on that right now. When we come back to take action, that might be a separate recommendation that the task force does. So we'll just make note on that.
We don't have that. Is that in here?
No,
Okay, I'm like, I don't think I saw that.
no. It would affect other areas of the code. Okay, so is there any other input besides the fire district input, which is just holding it to the 2022 fire code, and environmental health regulations regarding the type of generator? And we also still, Willie, we do have regulations on the storage of any hazardous materials, so that would include the fuel. That is already standard, so we'll make sure that this would touch that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I think what's important to note is that we just include the DCC requirements for generators throughout.
DCC requirements and the 2022 California Fire Code.
Yeah.
Good.
Exactly.
Okay. 2022 Fire Code. Okay, next section. Oh, wait, Jan took her hand down, okay. Temporary drying structures for cannabis processing. Tents, containers, hoop houses that are temporary drying structures. Paul, Willie, did you want to start with this one? Or you're part of it?
Yeah, so go ahead.
I'll let Paul address it.
So we're fine with the use of temporary structures for cannabis, obviously for the growing and everything, and the temporary structures for drying, because that's just kind of considered a storage occupancy. But once you start getting into processing of cannabis, it falls into that F occupancy category, which would have completely different standards attached to it compared to an S occupancy. So for temporary structures for processing, and maybe this is where we get into the definition of what we're finding processing as versus what the Cannabis Alliance is defining as processing, needs to be clarified so that we have a better idea. But when I start thinking of processing, they're taking it, they're breaking it down from its original form, they're packaging it, moving it, all that kind of stuff. And that's where it falls into that F occupancy. If it's something other than that, I would like to know what their definition or what they're saying it is. But if they're going to be doing processing right now off of what I know for that definition, then it's going to be an F occupancy and it cannot be temporary.
Sure, and we're in total agreement with that. We'd like for drying to fall under that S1 occupancy and then all other process to be F1. So I believe this is temporary dry structures for cannabis processing, and maybe we need to change that title,
I think the title
to
is
represent.
misleading.
Yeah.
So it's more temporary structures for cannabis drying.
Yeah.
Okay. So that we're not using the word processing and less confusion.
Correct.
Good. Okay.
Can we go back to the previous section for just a second?
Yes.
So the fire code, does that change so often? I'm just saying.
The fire code changes every 3 years. So January 1st of 2023 is when the 2022 edition of the California Fire Code went into effect. Prior to January 1st, we were working off of the 2019 California Fire Code.
Okay, so because we're creating this document, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are we going to come back every 3 years to amend that?
No, I think you
date?
made a good point. So
We can add a clause that says as amended, according to the state regulation, whatever state regulation, as amended.
Right. We might want to just also write current fire code at time of receipt of application.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that works too.
That's kind of one way to go about it. And the other thing is, a lot of times the fire code, unless something major happens, there's not typically a ton of variations from code to code. Like I said, the one of the big changes I saw this year is that they finally put in portable generators, which haven't been addressed at all up until this point, So some things definitely stay the same and might not need to be upgraded at all, and other things might have to be upgraded and brought up to whatever the current code standard is.
Okay, good. Any other, are you done?
That was
Got
good,
it?
yeah.
Okey doke. We will move on to, let's see, so we had Farm Bureau comments and LCCA comments specific to temporary drying structures, but I think we're all in agreement on this one, right? Or was there something further?
No, definitely in agreement with the intent of the use.
Okay, great. Yep.
So I know this will bog us down, I don't mean to, but I just want to ask while we're on it. So there are notes here that include specificity on the definitions of processing, processes. And that currently, I'm going on what it says here, the state's definition of processing includes drying. I'm not opposed to the direction this conversation is going. That's not the thrust of my comment. I just want to know, do we have something else to address when it comes to definitions or otherwise when we put together the final draft of this? Because, I mean, again, I don't want to go recasting things in a way that is different from the way the state is doing that. I realize that is the opposite direction of what we're supposed to be doing in these meetings. However, I wonder if, for the purposes of our definitions within this ordinance, we shouldn't be changing processing to mean all steps other than drying or cultivating.
I think we leave processing the same at the state level, but get specific in this temporary structure,
Okay.
or that drying is only allowed in an S1 or temporary structure.
Yeah, I think that when we
That's where we-
corrected the title, it kind of took out all of that
Then maybe that's,
clarification
okay,
needed.
okay, fair enough. In which case, never
Yeah.
mind.
It's a little confusing because all of those activities are considered processing under the state, but they can be uncoupled and separated at the local level.
Yeah.
And if you were doing all of that, all of those in the same place, they would all be considered processing by the state, but you can do some of them outside of that space and not have them require a processor license.
Well, they can also get broken down when you're talking about building code.
Exactly.
Because they're different impacts.
So I have a 7,500 square foot building. 2,500 square feet of that is F1 occupancy. The rest of it is S1 for this exact reason.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Anyway, thank you.
All right. Hoop houses, nothing. Tents, shipping containers, power supply. Here we go. Oh, C generators discussed earlier in this document. Okay. Farm Bureau was asking about the feasibility of utilizing a storage container as a temporary structure. Wondering how temporary these structures, the shipping containers actually would be.
So one of the things I think is important is that we're talking about a very short time period, 6 to 8 weeks, that these are used as a temporary dry structure, because we're talking about just drying at this point. And I know that and so it is temporary, its use is temporary in nature. And I don't think there's, in any other situation with any other use of containers, are they asked to be relocated? And there was discussion originally that these needed to be relocated every 2 months to make them temporary. The structure itself is somewhat permanent in its location, its use is temporary. So I think that's where,
If I may, one of the reasons why we wrote in temporary for that is because we need to bring drying structures online rapidly. But what we said is, if you're going to use them year after year, then you would have to get a permit for that shipping container to leave it in place and use it year after year. So if it were to become a more permanent structure, this provides that bridge to doing so.
because there is a permit for a permanent container.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Cargo containers count as this would be an agricultural accessory use.
Yeah.
And so in the definition of the cargo containers is a few requirements, like it can't look like a cargo container, you kind of need to make it look like a barn. And there's a mechanism that has to be put in the door so that you can't lock yourself in.
Oh, sure.
And it should not be, it shouldn't be in public view, I think, but I think it can look, it shouldn't look like just this ugly cargo container sitting in the middle of your.
How's that working out for us all?
Right? Yes.
I think it's safer, like, if somebody's gonna use them, that's fine, but they shouldn't have to move them off-site every so often, because it's like you're impacting the roads, it's a traffic safety issue, constantly moving those things around.
Every bit of ground disturbance, tearing up of everything would be exponentially worse because if you had to move them all the time.
That's exactly what
So I
our
think that
comments
was-
were in response to.
I think what's
Bruno's
important is that it's the use that's temporary.
But it's not like,
And we're supposed to be transitioning. Like, the goal of this is to give us some time to transition to a permanent structure.
a different permanent structure.
Correct,
Is
yeah.
there-
Okay.
Is there a way to, and I'm just thinking out loud, is there a way to put a sunset on it? So, for a period of up to 3 years? I don't know. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, and we talked about that in like, I know we talked about that with power, and we've talked about that as the general direction. It might not be specifically written in here.
It is.
But I think that what's important is that that sunset you're talking about will be specific to each project
Yeah.
upon
Yeah.
its
Right.
approval.
Right.
Like if somebody was issued like I don't know what, they get a use permit or something, then it's like, it's good, till however long, and then that's
So-
when it sunsets?
So the county use permits are good for 10 years and then I would say that within that conditions of approval, you have 3 years to convert any temporary structures to permanent. Or within 3 years from your approval date, there can no longer be use of temporary structures or.
What do you think about that?
I think it's up to the consensus of the task force.
Well, sure, but I mean, from an enforcement, I mean, this is.
So the thing about it is, if it's gonna be there permanently, and it counts as an agricultural accessory structure, it's just temporarily that it's gonna be used as a drying structure. But if it were me, I wouldn't want to just let it sit empty the rest of the 9 months, but really, who cares? It's an agricultural accessory structure, so, if it had electricity, it would need a permit. So we'd be watching for the health and safety stuff, all of that would be included. If it were me and I were using it for 3 months as a temporary drying structure, I'd probably be using it for storage other than that.
Yeah.
But all of that can be covered in your project description, so I don't really see the big deal.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
that's just me.
That's
It's-
why I
I'm not-
asked.
I'm not-
Okay.
I'm not the task force member, so.
Is 3 years long enough?
Who knows?
Well, I mean,
Put a 3-year clause in there, people are like, oh, I need 3.5 years.
Well, and then maybe
Right.
it's 3 years, extensions with proof of forward progress, like,
Right.
you can't apply for your PG&E permit in the 11th
Or
hour.
discretionary
Sure.
authority to approve extensions with the chief building official or the community development director or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to show some, like with our permitting, we have to show current, continuous
We want some
progress.
flexibility, we just don't want to enable never transitioning.
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Generators, yep, okay. Next one, setbacks. So there was the conversation, the input here was from Farm Bureau and LCCA regarding the overall size or space allowed for these temporary drying structures. Like this is the tents, isn't it? Size limit to, doesn't really say, but I think this was the size limit for like the tents, right? The drying tents. Because it said,
Setbacks?
yeah, under setbacks on F, actually, it's about the size.
Actually, if we can go back to setbacks, I didn't comment on this and because I was just replying to comments that are there. Yeah, never mind, sorry. So we're at F.
Okay, we're skipping the setbacks?
Yeah, I mean,
You're good with
we
them?
wrote, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we wrote this, that's why I was just like, never mind.
Okay. So then size, F, yeah, so Farm Bureau was saying 10% of 10 acres, that's a whole acre of temporary drying tent or structure. And then LCCA, go ahead, and Jennifer.
We would be happy with 10% of canopy,
That makes sense.
which makes perfect sense as well.
Which is still an acre, right?
No,
But the parcel size.
because of the parcel size,
I'm not gonna say that back, so I apologize.
for example, I've got 2 acres, I have 8,000, I could have 80, a little over 8,000 square feet of dry
Okay.
structures.
But that's 1%, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, not 10.
Well, yeah, we want 10% of canopy.
I believe Bruno covered this when he drafted the original resolution that we started reviewing. And I remember Catherine Vanderwall and I were in on a conversation about this. And I think the estimate he was leaning towards was 5% of canopy.
Is that gonna cover drying spaces for folks with like small farmers who have, like 5 or 10,000 square feet for cottage? Because I think some of them may have larger buildings on site. This is just temporary though, right? Never mind.
Yeah, but that's a good point, though.
It's all on the table, I suppose.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, I guess we should hear from the industry because it's like, I don't grow, so I don't know the space that it takes to dry the product.
So it would be reasonable.
Yeah.
So 10% of canopy.
Yeah.
I don't, just from reviewing so many applications and, monitoring approved projects, we rarely see anything reach that 10% of canopy. 5% is more likely what we see. It's about 2,000 square feet per acre, a little over 2,000 square feet per acre of outdoor. So just putting that, if you put it at 10,000, it's there if they need it. That way they don't get kind of choked. It's a little bit of breathing room, but I don't see too many people because building those, whether it's temporary or permanent, is expensive, and I think they're going to try to cut their costs as much as possible. So I just want to throw that out there.
I will say that historically, farmers have not planned enough drying space.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So
Really?
speaking from the phone calls that I receive every year, do you have any extra space? Yeah, it's actually been an issue. So
I wonder if there's could be a place where you could also write in discretionary review by the CDD, because there might be case-by-case basis too where that equation doesn't work perfectly. And I think to Jen's point, this is a chronic issue every year, and so it may not be a one-size-fits-all.
And there may be existing buildings.
Exactly.
So not have a 10%?
It could be there and then subject to modification with review and approval by the planning department.
Well, I want to pick the areas where I have discretion to keep them as little as possible, just for my own peace of mind. And I think it makes better regulations if things are standardized. So if we want to go with the 10%, what I'd like to see is also recognition that 10%, of course, conforms to all the setbacks.
And let's make sure that this is temporary.
Yeah.
So it's like if you are building something permanent, that can be something different.
Right. But though I appreciate what you're saying, Sarah, I don't know that I want discretion on this one, especially if LCCA is comfortable with 10%. And so if the board decides that that's where they want to go, it's already a significant increase. So hopefully now that will satisfy or that will accommodate all the individuals.
I hope this too, and we do see that this is classically underestimated and that there are kind of, case-by-case scenarios with square footage of buildings and structures. Maybe the size they come in, especially if you're talking about temporary, and then it could be a little off. So I also understand not wanting to have to review everything.
Well, like the number one condition of approval automatically always states that adjustments that have no foreseeable impact on the environment can be made discretionary by the community development director. So I am able to modify things slightly, though it's something that I prefer not to have to do. Because
Maria,
Yep.
sorry, I thought you were finished there. I didn't want to interrupt.
I'm done, yes.
Okay. I just want to add one comment on tents before we move past it. Our chief building official is not here today. He emailed me saying he couldn't be there, but something we were seeing this past year out on our inspections and something we want to maybe add language to is that the drying itself is not, I guess, attached to the frame of the tent or the hoop house. Those tents and hoop houses are not load bearing. And, a full size cannabis plant can weigh quite a bit. So we would like to see an internal structure within that, basically holds the load of the cannabis plant itself when drying. So I don't think it's been brought up, but it is a concern we have seen.
So that we would add something then to that, right? Because the stuff that you have highlighted just shows allowing the use.
It's pretty brief. Oh, wait, actually canvas material draped over and attached to a frame pulls. Just adding a clause or a sentence that states that, the load bearing structure must be separated from the frame of the tent itself.
I see what you're saying. So you're saying don't hook up all your drying stuff to the actual structure.
Yeah, don't hang it from the tent itself. The tent can shelter it, but it can't cover the weight of all those plants. So
Shouldn't.
Any comment, LCCA?
I would hope farmers are smarter than that. So I am like less words is my preference.
Well, Andrew's saying he saw it.
It is something we encountered, so
It may
more than once. So
verification.
And that is that. Sorry, Andrew, say that. So the like nets or whatever farmers were using to dry were attached to the internal structure of the tents. Is what you're saying?
whether you're like hanging strings or a cord from one end of the hoop to the other, or if it's another tent structure and the plants were attached to the frame above it, it was just creating a hazard that we saw. So having an internal load-bearing frame inside the tent or hoop to hold the cannabis plants up.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. That sounds like it was probably a.
All right, just the train going by. Okay. All right. Is there any strong objection to the addition of that clause? Great. Other than, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Just feels like over-regulations of somebody's bad decisions.
Right.
I think where the chief building official was concerned, if somebody is in there hanging that and the weight gets too big and the structure comes down on them, it creates a hazard there. Yes. So.
Okay, so that was back the page. Now we're going back ahead a page. We're staying at 10% of canopy instead of parcel size. And okay, I see the comments from fire districts underneath penalties and allowing review. But I'm not sure what it's addressing. Paul, do you want to, yeah, right there. Do you want to address that or speak to that input, please? Oh, this is just fire extinguishers. Okay.
Yeah, so that was just, it's not anything to go under H specifically. It was just kind of additional comments that if we're going to start having generators and stuff out there that are going to be fuel based, then we need to start opening up a discussion about having fire extinguishers present in the event that something happens and they catch fire and things along those guys for the workers, whoever's out there. So that's kind of where the fire extinguishers come in. And then also,
and isn't that all general code that should be adhered to?
That was one thing that actually wasn't specifically addressed in the fire extinguisher section of the California Fire Code, or the portable generator section of the California Fire Code. So I wanted to add that in there because it didn't fall to specifically that section. So I just wanted to put it in that way. It was known that this is something else that's going to have to be thought about in the event with all this. And then also, as far as the site plan, just something, because a lot of these places, I mean, some people have an acre, some people have a lot more acres, just an idea of where we're going. And if you get a phone call, even for a medical aid, where are we going? I'm at the back end of the property. Well, where's the back end of the property? So just, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be something etched in metal, but just something that's kind of attached to that Knox box where, hey, this is a paper printout of what our system looks like, right? And this is where workers are. This is where we're saying that the drying building is compared to the cultivation hoop houses, something to that effect, so that we have an idea where we're going with some of these larger cultivation sites.
So I don't have speaking from the LCCA, I don't have an issue with having that posted. I know as part of our conditions of use, we have to file our site plan with the fire departments. I don't really want my site plan out at my Knox box where anybody can see exactly where my storage is.
No, it's not even something that has to be posted visibly. It could be printed out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and those Knox boxes have room in there to where you can fold it up and put it in, and it will be locked up so that when we unlock it, we have an idea of where we're going.
What kind of Knox box are you talking about then? Because mine's like 6 inches by 6 inches.
Okay, so you've got one of those ones. It's
Yeah.
like I said, it doesn't have to be a big fancy printout. It could literally be an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that just is here's the site plan so we know where we're going. It doesn't have to be posted. I put posted. Sorry, it does not need to be posted if that's a security issue that you have. But you can fold it up on a piece of paper and put it in there so that we have an idea of what's
Can I
going
get into
on.
my Knox box?
But
Can I get into my Knox box?
No, only the fire department can. So when we go to put the keys in, then we would have to put that in there at the same time. So only the fire department has keys to get in.
Well, can you just do that then when you do your inspection?
Yes. Yes, we could absolutely do that.
Okay, so but we don't have a requirement of type of Knox boxes. So for the folks who have some, are there Knox boxes then that won't fit an 8.5 by 11 folded up?
There might be one, but it's residential grade.
Okay.
The rest of them, and I mean, if people start getting into the area where they start getting gate code boxes instead, where it's just the key that we put in and it turns the gate, we can actually add notes into our system. If you had a storage shed or a guard shack or something that was right there, that we could put in our note system that when you arrive on scene to this particular place, based off of that Knox box, that there will be a site map that's posted in the guard shack to the left of the gate. Ask the guard for it, or whatever it may be. Or there is going to be a storage unit over here to the right so that we have an idea of where we're going. Like I said, not completely pertinent because some of these places are relatively small, 1 acre, but we do get into larger areas that start kind of becoming problematic trying to find our way around to
Paul,
where people are.
do you not have the ability to access the site plans that they send in to the fire districts?
I do, but the guys on our responding equipment might not.
So what if the language was something like, site plan posted in a visible, in a visible manner within the route of entrance or something? I don't know. Let the lawyers fancy it up, but like I can see like down my road, which is about, 100 yards, there's a storage container that I could have a laminated large print site plan.
You could do something to that effect. You could also just put up it, say that you have 26 structures there, and you could line them all up in a row and put them A to Z so that we know you're going to structure, T as in Tom, and we know that we're going, okay, here's A, B, C, D, and we just have an idea of where we're going. I don't want to overthink this. I just want to know that for some of these larger projects that we're not going to be driving around wasting precious minutes. If it is a medical aid, fire is a little bit easier because you have something that you're looking for, a column of smoke. So you can kind of start going that direction. But if we have a medical aid, and somebody's having a heart attack, where are we going? Because it's not like there's going to be a big column of smoke or lights over here that we have an idea of where we're going to.
Question. So, the farming operation that I work with is responsible for making sure that first responders can get to anyone who needs help during any of the business hours that we're operating. We have things like site maps and address lists and various things of that nature. But I mean, it seems to me that, is the same requirement placed on Scully Packing? That is there a site map available to the fire department that if they have to show up, they know which building to drive around to know where to go to find the office, to find the person who's having a heart attack? I mean, I'm just sort of trying to make a comparison to other industries and other things. Is the same requirement put upon a commercial operation in Lake County other than cannabis?
If they are doing their pre-fire plans, then yes, that is part of their pre-fire plans, which is something that we're currently working with at Kelseyville to bring up to code, is to get those site plans for Kelseyville lumber, for the schools, for this and for that, to reduce response times, because that's wasted precious minutes.
Sure, understood.
So yes, it is something, if you actually look in the fire code, there is the authority in there to have site plans present if requested.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
So that would be just a condition that we comply with whatever that code is, right?
Correct.
Okay. I think this one's gonna need a little further massaging. I'm not getting a total sort of sense of consensus on this one yet, so we're gonna move on to the other one.
I think it's all doable.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we just need to work on the wording.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
Can I make a suggestion?
What's that?
Huh?
Yes, please go ahead.
I brought this up before, but
Oh.
a simple
Sorry,
GPS.
I'm sorry. Are we open for public comment? I thought that was one of the task force members.
Not yet, not yet.
Okay.
But
Sorry,
we're almost
quiet
done,
observer.
actually. Okay. So the last one is just additional questions for task force discussion. Will any of the proposed changes require additional CEQA environmental review? I don't know. I'll have to take a look at once we get the ordinance written. If we can exempt it, we will. But at this point, I'm not sure.
It's probably based on each project.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah.
It comes.
Most projects are going through initial studies anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll just toss it all in. It just changes our project description. Okay, so good. Yes, yeah.
Glad I got mine.
Let's see, fuel storage on site for generators and other equipment requiring fuel. This is from the fire. Yes, and how and where this be stored, secondary containment, that's actually also part of the project description and is addressed in the initial study as well. So fire reps will have plenty of time to comment on that.
And part of state code as well, and
Yeah,
water boards.
yep. Which department shall issue permits? Catherine?
You guys, I just,
Which department shall issue permits for temporary ag structures? We do ag exempt, but if Catherine wants to take it.
I mean, I signed off on the ag exempt, but
Yeah.
ultimately it goes to your department.
Well, yeah, which I think it's right to stay in community development because we're the land use permit people.
Yeah, and you're the one, your department's the one that's processing all the cannabis applications.
Exactly.
I don't even see those except for review, so.
Yeah, it was worth a try, but I think it makes more sense to keep it.
I think so.
Okay. Could the agricultural hoops section qualify for an urgency ordinance? That is a legal question. Typically, urgency ordinances, it's a threat to public health and safety. Yeah, I don't know that this fits that.
And I guess the follow-up to that would be, can we get this implemented now ahead of the whole ordinance rewrite because it is time sensitive?
We don't typically change the rules without the ordinance going into effect.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you mean is not the whole cultivation ordinance, or do you mean this whole ordinance?
Any of these changes would require an amendment to the zoning ordinance, and that's done through an ordinance. Yeah, which has the public hearing and the second reading, and then unless it's an urgency ordinance or a rezone, it goes into effect 30 days after the adoption.
But can we adopt this ahead of our whole, we're at the beginning of this landing strip of work and we need this answered now.
My understanding is that this draft ordinance is going forward on its own.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're not
that's what we're asking
throwing it
for.
into the big old stuff.
That's what we're asking for, great.
Yes. That I feel is consistent with the board's direction. Just like the next one we're gonna talk about is also board direction as a priority.
Exactly.
So someday we're gonna get to the general stuff. We just haven't quite gotten that opportunity yet.
This could be the most difficult part of it though.
This topic.
They could, yeah, well, there are
Well, no,
priorities.
there's another one coming up that's difficult as well, never mind.
Good, all right. And then finally, it was a question from Fired. Is cannabis considered an agricultural product or a commercial product? So just so everybody's clear, and I know Willie had to step out for a fire call. So for Paul, for fire representation, we do consider cannabis an agricultural product. It is not an agricultural commodity, which is a federal designation. And so when it is decriminalized, deregulated, when it's no longer a type 1
When
some
it's
or other-
descheduled.
There you go, thanks. Then it will then qualify for agricultural commodity status, and we won't have to have this conversation
Ever again.
Yes. Good. Okay, so now I'm hitting a moment of indecision because public has to be able to comment on every item. So
Back to the top.
back to the top, however, we're still on just the presentation. We just got through the presentation.
And we have a comment from Jan.
Or what I would recommend is that the public input be kept to when we're going now on number 5. But we are going to open number 4 for public input.
Well, are we still waiting for the, maybe I missed it, I don't know. The fire safety, the roads, for what their 4290 ag
Yeah, I
standards
know,
were?
Paul never got back to us whether that was ag, the 10 feet. He was still checking on
What
that.
about the ag? I can't find anything that specifically addresses the ag on that, so I'm gonna have to do more research, but for the 4290, it would be 10 foot for a private driveway or a single lane road. So I need to do more research on that ag and see if there's something else.
And
Does it become a moot issue based upon the document that Andrew provided?
Well, if they have standards for ag though, I think that's what he's looking to
Right.
say.
We have a comment, we'd have to confirm it, but it's that, 4290 compliance, there's 4290 standards for residential, commercial, and industrial uses, but not for ag. So
Okay,
perhaps that's why it might be hard to find anything on it because it doesn't exist. So
so before I open up to public input, Jan has her hand up again. And then we're gonna open it up to public input, and then we'll go on to item number 5, which is where we're gonna start making these recommendations. Jan?
Hear me?
Yep.
Okay. One, I had one question for clarification. When the new amended ordinance that we're working on goes into effect, will everyone that had permits prior to that be grandfathered in, or are they going to have to make a bunch of changes and comply with this new ordinance? That was one question. Do you know?
Well, what it seems like is this ordinance allows for things, but it doesn't mandate things. So I would think that if somebody wanted a temporary structure, then that's when they'd be reaching out to us if their permit was already approved.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of all the extra roads and stuff, but, okay, and then my second one, I just went blank, forget it. Oh, my second one was, because they do need us to make some decisions quickly so they can get started. And this ordinance is going to be a long time coming to get it complete, and we want to do it right. Can we go ahead and get a couple things approved in the meantime, so we're not feeling rushed to do the whole rest of the ordinance, because there's a lot of stuff to go through. But I do realize, we're in January. These people probably need to get a lot of plans in order.
My plan is to leave this room today with recommendations from the task force. At which point I will start pressuring Catherine to schedule a special meeting for the Ag Advisory Committee so we can get that done. They've already said that they're ready to meet. And so we'll get that done as soon as possible. And then I'm gonna schedule that planning commission hearing as soon as possible. So the task force isn't gonna have to rush. I'm gonna have to push it as far as timeline goes to make sure that this doesn't stall. But the task force is gonna move on to something, hopefully the very next meeting.
Thank you.
Sure thing. All right, so we're gonna open it up to public. It looks like, this looks like Bart's phone number, I'm not sure. 2816205. Is that you, Bart?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. This is Bart Levinson. I'm very concerned that throughout this discussion, I'm not hearing adequate recognition that we're talking about sizes of projects that are everything from the small producer to the largest grows in the state. And I am not hearing enough recognition in your actual terminology of the codes, et cetera, that would apply adequately for a small scale farm and equally to a grow that's the largest in the state. And I'm concerned greatly about that.
Thanks, Bart. Who's next? Quiet observer.
That would be me. This is Brad. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah.
That was Brad.
We were talking about the lock boxes, and boy, I really understand the Smith said that she doesn't want people having a map to her grow, and I really get that. And I suggested this before, that a GPS unit could mark their location with a very specific, I think it's like a 7-digit code with letters and numbers. And it could be broadcast up to a satellite. It can be read by first responders, either at dispatch in St. Helena or the local fire departments, etc. And when they were to get a call, let's say, hey, my husband's got a heart attack and I need medical up here now. Where are you? Well, I'm, go down 7 hoop houses, make a left, and, no. So how about a map that designates your specific grow site, and say, let's say that your growing units would be G1 through 99, and then maybe your drying units would be D through 1 through 10, and your residents would be residents 1 through whatever, and this type of thing. And this would all be on a map that could be accessed in the cab from the emergency vehicle. And then they could open that lockbox and go, boom, right directly to it, because they're following a GPS. And I think that total cost per grow site for that little device is a couple $100. And then the program for the dispatch or for the fire departments, ambulances, blah, 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 could have a program that would be paid for by all of the growers in the county. And you guys would be protected really, really well. And you wouldn't need to have a little map in a lockbox. You wouldn't have to have it on the side of your shipping container, and it would just all be in the system. And you called, hey, my husband's at G44. Vehicle drives to G44 and starts the help. And
Thanks, Brad.
That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on to the next caller, I recognize that it's now 2:30, which when we started our task force, I kind of promised you guys I wouldn't keep you past that. But if everybody's willing to hang in there today, I'd really like to get recommendations from the task force. So in light of that, I see a number of hands that are still raised. We are going to limit your input to 2 minutes. So that, because I'm hoping that you're also going to have input when we get to our actual recommendations. So if you do have input that is specific to an item that you know we're going to go back to, please keep your comments for that item. But if you have something that's more general, I'm going to call on you next after I get my timer here.
Maria, I can go ahead and time the comments if that's easier for you.
That would be great. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, and there was a hand raise from Patrick Rietz of Lakeport Fire District,
Yeah, I
although it
just
looks
saw
like
Chief.
I was
Right,
gonna
Rick.
try to skip to his response, perhaps directly to that, but
I don't see him. I think
I don't
he
know.
dropped,
I guess,
so
yeah.
Guest is next.
Okay.
Okay, Maria, now you totally confused me. So I just had two quick questions. One was going to be, how do the hoop houses fit into the county's beautification plan, especially along the scenic corridors? And does anybody, opening a temporary process or pathway for permanent permits, isn't this kind of the same path that we took with early activation? It just has that same kind of feel to it, that we're opening up something that can be exploited at some point.
Thank you. This is Angela, right?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Hey, Angela. So the scenic combining restrictions would still apply. And then secondly, this would not be an early activation of use because this temporary use would be part of the project description that would be going forward with the whole use permit project. So the board rescinded any early activation of use permits. But I do appreciate that question.
Right. No, if somebody already, so let's say somebody's already growing and they have a permitted cannabis grow, and then they want to use a temporary cultivation structure, they're not going to go back to it. They're not going to go back through the whole process through CEQA, initial study, and all of that, right?
Anytime there, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to say, if needed, we do get amendments to our plans quite often. We review them. If it triggers CEQA again, then yes, it would have to go through the state clearinghouse again. Also, I was going to follow up on within the scenic combining house, greenhouses, hothouses, and I believe it's incidental structures are limited to 5,000 square feet. So
okay, so and just one last thing though, so the one that I noticed the most is the one out on Augulin Canyon. Is that what we're describing when we're talking about temporary cultivation hoop houses? There's a large one out on Augulin Canyon on the hill.
That city of Clear Lake? Yeah. Angela, that's city, so I'm not familiar with that project.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Andrew, who's next?
looks like Damian Ramirez would be next.
Great.
Hello, everyone. I'll make it real brief. Just insight on the Knox box discussion. I have two separate properties from two separate fire districts that have already approved a Knox box brand lock. So it's not necessarily a box as the name says. So obviously that would be impossible for me to put anything in those. Again, they are independently approved by two different fire departments for both separate properties. I'm sure there's a solution to it, some sort of instructions to go somewhere else to the security station on site or something to get more information if you need it. As far as the 4290 standards, I think sounds like it's a moot point because cultivation does not apply for cultivation, but if it did, that would make things very, very difficult for operators. It would be hard to plan. The footprints are limited as is. A lot of people are topographically challenged in the areas because of the zoning where they put some of these grows. So I really encourage everyone to look into that and make sure that's going to be okay. And we could do something reasonable that can still uphold the safety standards that the fire department and everyone wants. Generators. Yeah, the generators have always been allowed for cultivation from the state side and from the county side. I specifically had in one of my projects that was approved by the Planning Commission, generators use, and they reviewed it in depth, and they found that it was okay for outdoor cultivation, just so you know. Of course, you need to meet certain standards with the Lake County air quality, which we're all aware. And then lastly, I just want to encourage everyone, if we don't come to definitive words on every single part of this. The idea of having the cultivation hoops going through as soon as possible. I can't stress it enough. Everyone's, I know a lot of people that are trying to plan for the upcoming growing season, and we really need at least that to some clear direction so we can start planning. Thank you all for your time.
Okay. Thanks, Damien. That was a little past the 2 minutes. So.
All right, so it looks like the last public input we have on this item is Linda.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Hi, this is Linda Bryant, our current permittee, and it was just spoken, just addressed what I was going to say, is I'm one of those that is anxiously awaiting guidelines who has a permit and already gone through CEQA. What I would be looking for is some guidance that could be created by the task force for those of us who are already permitted, what we can do to not trigger CEQA, kind of a checklist after you guys have gone through all of this sundry of items. What can we do to focus on so that that would not trigger CEQA would be greatly appreciated. That is it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Linda. Just as a general piece of information, the county does not usually tell you how to avoid CEQA. The county takes in your project description and does the proper analysis. So I just want that out there since we're recording this meeting, otherwise county council would be all over me. Okay. That being said, we're going to move on to number 5, which is consideration of recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. So we're going to go back. I am intending to focus on the areas where there are comments. But task force members, if you have something else that you want to make sure we cover, feel free to jump out because this is the moment we've all been waiting for. Ag exempt structures, we already took action on that. Is there anything further that's necessary? Looking for hands from the committee. Nope. Okay, number 2, agricultural hoops for cultivation only. Instead of ag exempt hoops for cultivation, we're going to use a different term, like temporary hoops for cultivation. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Bart and Damien, I'm not sure if you just haven't taken your hands down or if you just put them back up again. But we're not doing, oh, good, thank you, cleared, okay. Moving on, let's see. We're going to add wording in this section, which is the temporary hoops for cultivation, that says that they are exempt from building permits if they fit this criteria. We good there? All right. How do you want to do this? Do you want to just be good by consensus? Do we take a vote? I'm trying to get us through this as efficiently as possible.
If somebody on the task force does not consent?
Then we just consider
then
it
they
approved.
speak?
Okay, I could do that. So
they all seem agreeable in the room.
yeah, we've gotten those done. Well, that was just a title, so we're getting into the good stuff now. Okay, does anybody disagree with adding wording that the temporary hoops for cultivation would be exempt from building permits? That would be added into the ordinance. Anybody? Nope. Okay, good. Next one. There was a comment from Robert Geary regarding specifying the method of anchoring hoops to the ground and adding this to the application information that's in this ordinance. Is there any dissension on that one? No hands in the Zoom. Okay, now we get to the 4290. Is the task force amenable to applying agricultural standards for 4290 and 4291 to these, what section are we in? To the roads or to fire safety?
Yeah, and I think we could probably cite the resolution 2019-124.
Okay, so conformance to, what was that again?
It's a resolution, it's a resolution or ordinance?
It's a resolution.
Resolution 2019-124.
Okay.
Because that's where they state that. dissension in there.
Is there any dissension to that being the guiding principle for roads, for cultivation areas?
That was the document that.
That's the one that Andrew did. Okay. I see no dissension. That is now a recommendation. Okay. Then we go down to, okay, temporary hoops with pathway to permanent. A recommendation that we have received is that the generator regulations be more globally located. And they apply to temporary as well as permanent. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Is there any dissension in the Zoom room, Andrew?
No, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, and then input regarding the structures, I have notes here. The consensus that I've got is that it comply with DCC requirements and the current fire code at the time of application submission. Or should it be, I think that's probably better right now because it's taking us a while. We might bridge an adoption of a code and I wouldn't want to have to change our project to deal with any new rules, right? So we'll lock it in at application submission. Is there anybody with dissension on that recommendation? Moving on, section number 3. This is temporary structures for cannabis drying is the reword of the title. And the only thing we have to agree with, the recommendation is to allow the use of temporary drying structures for cannabis. Okay. Cultivation specifically, not processing, but we changed that title. Moving on to hoop houses. It looks like there's, there was really nothing about hoop houses. So we have no comment or recommendation on that one. It just as it stands. Is that correct?
Correct.
So,
I don't see anybody in Zoom disagreeing. Next section, tents. We're going to add the cumbersome additional requirement that Jennifer finds overreaching, that please do not hook up all of your load to the actual structure itself. We'll add wording that the load be, what's the right wording for that? That it be located on an internal load-bearing frame.
yeah, a structure within the building itself should support the weight of the hang drying plants.
Yes, sometimes it's silly that we have to make these rules. I agree. I totally agree, Jennifer. I'm not disagreeing with you at
I
all.
would also like a 72-ounce Diet Coke.
We could add that. We're not done with our recommendations.
It's not allowed some places.
Okay, moving on. Oh, so is there any dissension to adding that very helpful requirement? I don't see any. Okay, next one. Shipping containers. My understanding, and this could just be in my own mind, so feel free to jump in here. But my understanding is that the shipping container is going to be allowed as a permanent agricultural accessory use, as is normally regulated, with a temporary drying use. But recognizing that, we'll see. Okay, Jennifer.
Yeah, how'd we get here?
We were talking about restricting the use of shipping containers and then moving them out.
Right.
But we don't really need to move them out because they're an acceptable agricultural accessory use. So then we're only using them for temporary as drying structures in so much as it's a sort of a transitional thing.
Yeah.
Using it for drying structures, but that use would sunset within 3 years of issuance of permit. In order to dry in a permanent drying structure.
Mariah, I think what you said matches what's written, except for that it gives you a 3-year transition.
So we're adding a
period,
3-year
because it
sunset
says
clause.
we have
you
one down
either
there.
remove them or you handle them as a permanent structure. That's what the recommendation says. So I think you just extended that to 3 years to mean that they could be used for drying for up to 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a sunset on the drying use for 3 years.
Yeah.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you. That was helpful. Okay. And any dissension on that one? The room? No? Good, okay. We didn't really have much comment under power supply because we dealt with generators elsewhere. The next part I see where we have a recommendation is limiting the total square footage of drying structures to 10% of canopy, not parcel size. Any dissension on that as a recommendation? Seeing none. Additional recommendations, the one from the fire district regarding the site plan. We could add a recommendation that the location of the site plan be conveyed to the fire district, before operation or something like that. And that way the fire district will know where to look for that site plan, whether it be in a Knox box that can accommodate it or someplace else that they can access in case of emergency. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a recommendation that doesn't have anything to do with this ordinance, but we can add it in a section for additional recommendations. And let's see, I think we answered those questions. Though, just to be doubly sure, I'll check with county council regarding any sort of urgency ordinance possibility. We'll take that into consideration as we move forward. So I'll double check. Looks like we're good. That's all I've got. Does anybody have anything else?
Did you just clarify that you'll issue the permits?
Yeah, that was just a question. So yeah.
Because it wasn't clarified in
No, I think
the
it's being
original
facetious.
language, and I think it does need to be, like, the direction has to be given to the board about who's gonna issue these.
Yeah, let's make that a recommendation. Which department shall issue permits? Does anybody have any dissension on the permits being issued by the Community Development Department? Okay, thank you, Sarah, for making sure that we got that. And so that's all I've got. Is there any additional input? Members of public, do you have anything to add? Task force members, are we all in consensus? I don't see any dissension. I think that I have clear direction then on the list of recommendations from the task force. Thank you all so much for hanging in with this one. I am going to draft these recommendations. They will become part of the minutes at the next meeting in case anybody disagrees with the wording, but I'm also going to run to the Ag Advisory Board. So
do we need to wait till our next meeting to have your final draft approved by this?
do we want to wait 2 weeks? We kind of have to do it in an open session, don't we? Yeah. Okay, but that's fine. And then we can just set it for right after that. Okay, so I will place this on the next agenda for approval, and we'll schedule an Ag Advisory meeting to just directly follow that one.
I was gonna say, there's no reason why you can't, I know it would be a waste of a meeting, but you could
Give
schedule.
you a draft.
Schedule it and put it on the agenda, but then we would have to approve it at our next meeting prior to the Ag Advisory panel.
Yeah. I'm thinking, like, we have this on a Monday and we have Ag Advisory on a Wednesday.
Monday evening.
Yeah. Okay, and then, let's see, status of existing cannabis permits, we are skipping.
Okay, I was going to say I can get to that next time.
Yeah, that's great. And then discussion on concentration of cannabis retail sales. Just a quick update. At our next meeting, I will have a memo written out for you about what the board directed staff to bring to you for consideration. But it's about two things: the appropriate level of permitting for cannabis retail and the options available for regulating density. whether the task force supports it or not, or you have ideas or options, I'll bring to you a few different things, just so we have a place to start discussions. And that's all I've got.
Do we anticipate that being our next meaty issue?
That is our next priority.
One thing we might want to consider getting to the task force is the state has language on concentration. So if we could, I'm happy to, I have it.
Yes, I'm
linked
familiar
up right
with
now.
that language too. I was kind of when the board brought it up, I realized the state already oversees this. However, I think what the board is looking for is potentially a threshold from the county. But Maria will get to that.
Yeah, Nara, if you could send that wording in, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yep, I can do that. That way we all kind of have at least a sense of what the state's saying and then how we want to make that
You can also send it out to an email
specific
to
the
everyone.
local jurisdiction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that for retail operations?
Just retail.
Yes.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
concentration of retail.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's all I got. We're gonna adjourn. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.